So verticals are a really interesting topic, and I want to thank all the lawyers for saying that they are the inexpensive part of doing a Reg A plus, and that marketing is the very expensive part, being that marketing is the area in which myself and my firm participates. So we'll get into that. Also later today on another panel, we're going to try to change everyone's vocabulary from marketing to investor acquisition. Anyway, we're here now to talk about verticals. In the agenda, it talks about fan-based, real assets, real estate, cannabis, how things are turning into fractional shares of just about anything. And actually, a bunch of us are working on something with a stable coin. So I am, again, Andrew Korn. I'm the CEO of E5 Marketing. So why was I asked to moderate this panel? I've worked on hundreds of deals and basically work on the math, meaning what's the probability that something will work or not work, what can be sold or not work. Today I'm joined by three top attorneys. Their firms are among the deepest experience in Reg A plus between them, and they see everything. And of course, their perspectives include not just what is legal, but what will the SEC qualify. So I'm going to jump in and ask some questions and then see if additional panelists want to opine as well. I'm going to start with Lou, and each person, when I ask the first question, if you can just state your name and company would be great. So Lou, a recent trend has been selling fractional shares in different assets such as art and collectibles, which include everything from race cars to paintings to racehorses, real estate, et cetera. How does this work from a Reg A plus offering perspective?
Sure. I think this is really a super interesting trend that's happening now. And it's basically issuers are using series limited liability companies. So they're very popular in Delaware. Most states accept them. There's a few that don't. But it's basically one limited liability company, but you have the ability to create different series. So you only file one articles of organization with the Secretary of State, let's say in Delaware, and it'll have language that says you can create additional series. And then the manager of the LLC, whether it's a board or an external manager, can just create those series by signing what's called a series designation. It's basically an internal document that doesn't get filed anywhere. And so you could have series one that has, XYZ asset and has its own members, series two that has a totally different asset with totally different members, and so on. So, basically it's like having many different LLCs, but it's really only one LLC technically. And what's really cool about it is the way that the way it works from a Reg A perspective is it's one Regulation A offering. So basically, let's say you have a series LLC.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. I apologize. Let's just take a step back and talk about what fractionalized shares means and pick any one of the things like a car, a painting, a racehorse, and explain
Sure.
what that means for a second. Thank
So one of our clients is a company called Otis Gallery, and they sell arts and collectibles. And so their first series, they acquired a Kehinde Wiley painting, and they sold fractionalized interest in the Kehinde Wiley painting. So you can own $10,000 worth of, I don't know if it's a $200,000 painting, I forget the amount. So, you have many different investors who are participating in that series one, and each of them owns their own percentage interest of that series, which owns only the painting, and that's all it's ever going to own, right? So it might generate income from the painting by showing it at galleries or whatever, or it might eventually sell the painting, at a profit or a loss, and those investors would participate in the economics of owning that painting. And so they have really, really cool things that they're putting in their series, like, sneakers that cost upwards of $200,000 and skateboards and all kinds of neat art and collectibles. And so you can participate in that, right? You may not be able to buy a $200,000 pair of sneakers that you think is going to appreciate, but you can buy maybe $10,000 worth of a pair of sneakers and still participate in that alternative asset. So I think it's a really really cool thing that's going on. And there's a lot of different companies doing this. So it's happening in real estate. You know, we have a Compound Projects as a client of ours, and Arrived Homes. And they're selling either fractionalized interest in a single family house, so you can participate in the rental income of that single family house, or maybe it's a condo in Miami. And so it just allows investors to participate in an asset class that they might not otherwise be able to participate in because they only have a limited amount of funds to invest. And it's all done through this Series LLC. And what I was getting into, which I think is really interesting, is from the Reg A perspective, it's one offering. So for example, you might have, you know, the company set up with Series 1 and 2 with 2 different assets. You file the Reg A offering, it gets qualified, you sell the securities, the interest in those 2 series, and then when you want to add Series 3 and 4, you don't file a new Reg A offering statement, you do a post-qualification amendment to your existing Reg A offering statement. And what seems to happen is that after the SEC has reviewed, you know, the base filing and then maybe 2 or 3 amendments, they really understand the company. And so they either don't review the additional series, or if they do, they're already familiar with it, so there are fewer questions. And so it's a very efficient way for these companies to keep raising capital in different series.
Great, thank you. So, you know, sticking with these different verticals, Kendall, you have the honor of having worked on the very first US-based cannabis cultivator for Reg A. And, you know, being that there's, you know, banking issues and it's not nationally legal, it's legal in states, can you tell us what your experience was with that and what are some of the special challenges there?
Sure, and let me also add something to what Lou said. I think that before I get to the cannabis, the fractional interest, these series LLCs are fascinating, primarily because, you know, like the racehorses, for example, I've always wanted to own just a hoof of a horse. And so I can actually go ahead and invest, you know, $100 or $200 and just own a little piece of a racehorse. It opens up the door to multiple things. I have a client, for example, that we will be filing very soon that is going to, their goal, it's you know, a very admirable goal. They want to create 100,000 people of color who become millionaires in the next 10 years by allowing them to invest in real estate. How could you possibly do that without going through Regulation A, where you have the ability to do these series of multiple different real estate projects and let people invest a small amount? So it's really it's a great equalizer for people. And one thing to keep in mind, though, is at least right now under the law, you are limited in that company to only raising $50 million per year. So if you have enough of these series to where the total amount that you're raising is over $50 million, you have to do another company within that year. Obviously, the SEC is planning to raise that to 75 million. That'll help, but it is something to keep in mind. It's not an unlimited series of where you can just keep adding another racehorse or adding another piece of real estate. You got to stay within that cap. Real quickly about cannabis, I did have the pleasure of having the first U.S. cultivator. They touch the plant, they grow cannabis, they sell cannabis all legally in California. The first one to ever be qualified by the SEC. And what I thought was funny about it was when we started finally talking about this publicly before it was qualified, there was a couple of newspaper articles where lawyers said Kendall's going to go to jail. He's going to get arrested at his house in DC. This is illegal. Of course, the SEC did not take that attitude, thank God. The SEC, you know, we discussed this with them before we ever filed. They were well aware that there are other federal agencies that deal with cannabis companies, even though there's banking issues, obviously. The post office, the IRS, I could go on and on, that deal with cannabis companies on a daily basis. That are federal agencies and have no problem dealing with cannabis companies. So the SEC took the attitude of, you know, honestly, it went through as smoothly as any other filing I've ever had. There was no questions or comments that were related to the federal illegality because we had cleared that up beforehand. It's really remarkable that, you know, the bigger issue for me was what's going to happen at the state level. As was talked about on the last panel, cannabis is illegal in many states. And so we took the added step of actually going to, even though we weren't required to do this, we took the extra step of going to every state regulator and asking them if they had a problem with us selling a stock of a company that sells and cultivates cannabis legally in their state, but that would be illegal in the state where we are now selling the stock. And interestingly, we had no problems, no complaints from any state regulators except one. And it was a very interesting conversation. In Louisiana, we got an email from the state regulators that basically said, you know, we're not going to tell you not to do this, but we're not 100% sure we're comfortable with it. There could be criminal penalties. When the word criminal comes up, we immediately all run away. And the company decided to not offer the, and by the way, had a very, very nice conversation with the regulators there who had no problem with it on a personal level, but they had obviously run into some issues in the past with cannabis, particularly at LSU University, where they were trying to do some studies and some scientific things, and somebody didn't like that. So it was really interesting to go through that process on a state-by-state level, which you normally don't do, and frankly isn't required. But the lack of pushback was really remarkable, and the company now has sold stock in all 49 states and also 38 foreign countries, many of which cannabis is illegal in. So the SEC was not an issue at all. They were wonderful to work with on it, and you know, it's the door's open now.
That's great to hear. So I want to move on to Andrew for a first question, but I know that you wanted to say something to add some of your thoughts on the fractional shares. If you could share, please.
Oh, sure. So yeah, so this was so information I tried to put into the chat, but I guess it didn't make it out to all attendees. But just in response to a few questions that came in there. But first, for a kind of brief introduction. So I'm Andrew Stephenson with CrowdCheck. So we're a law firm as well as a service provider for compliance so focused on online securities offerings that were made possible as a result of the Jobs Act. And so we've seen, we worked with, been around since 2012 and seen, every manner of company that's kind of coming through and trying to explore how they can take advantage of sort of online sales of securities and reaching a broader audience without using a traditional financing structure of investment bank intermediaries. And as Lou brought up, the fractional ownership and using series LLCs is really interesting because it allows for, and it's something that really is only possible because of Reg A and because of the ability to reach investors through online mass communications. And so just a couple just notes that I put into the chat that I didn't go out, I think I just did it incorrectly, so it didn't go out to everybody. It was really just that that sort of, whenever, so using the series LLC, the asset is owned by the series. The series acts as a separate entity, even though it is a kind of a series of a master LLC. So the series owns the asset, investors own part of the series. And each series is segregated from every other series. So if a creditor comes after one asset, they will not be able to touch any of the other assets. And that's something that's really important and why series LLCs are so useful in this way. But then it's just a matter of the practicality for that company using the series LLCs. Just to make sure they do maintain their separate books and records, because that's one of the reasons why other states aren't some states aren't as favorable to series LLCs as Delaware is. They don't like how companies can sort of, they think it's sort of kind of a sham in the way that they're sort of, but you're really one company, right? No, we're a master LLC and we have each series that operates as a separate entity. And so it's important to actually operate those series as separate entities with separate books and records and bank accounts and the like.
Great. So I'm going to break in and ask you specifically about another vertical, which is fan-based or affinity groups. I know your team has a bunch of experience there and we're actually working on one together. So if you could talk to us about that. Yeah,
and again, and this is again something that becomes possible as a result of the Jobs Act and Regulation A as it's currently written. So with with the standard registered offering, your companies are very limited in how they can market, how they can reach a wider audience. It's sort of everything is just limited by what's in your offering prospectus that went through the registration process with the SEC. With Regulation A, you've got ability to do massive testing the waters, to reach everybody, even after you filed, but not yet qualified the offering. You can still go out and do that testing the waters. And then once qualified, you still have wide ability to communicate through digital means. So you're also meeting the requirement to deliver a copy of the offering circular. And so what we've seen is a lot of companies that have that have existing networks or have networks that they can tap into, either sort of whether it's fan-based. So if a sort of music artist or a sports team wants to reach their community, reach their fans, make those fans into owners. They can do that because they have that marketing data available from their existing operations, so they're able to reach out and have it and get those people interested, or they can just be using kind of communication channels that they normally use for marketing. Marketing what they do, able to get those people interested and become investors who will be so it's kind of taking a little next step in being committed to to that team or that artist. It's making a person owner, or having some sort of financial interest in the success of that person or team.
So I'm going to jump in on that and say fan base is very interesting. Also, if it's music and they mostly appeal to tweens, as if, for instance, they're not really an investor class.
That's gonna be a little challenging because it's they have to have parents to buy for them. But,
so new music versus classic music, classic rock might be a little bit better depending upon who it is, and that again is from an investor acquisition perspective. So I'd love to change the topic to real estate for a second, and I know that Lou had some ideas on that, and I know that both Kendall and Andrew have worked on that as well. So Lou, can you talk to us about new trends going on in real estate?
Yeah, sure. I think RegA has been great for real estate. I mean, there's tons of REIT offerings. You look like a REIT sponsor like Cottonwood has done 4 or 5 different REITs where they've raised lots of capital and have been able to develop multifamily properties. So I think people understand real estate, and retail investors want to get involved in real estate. So it's a great industry for RegA. And then we spoke about, fractionalizing interest in real estate, whether it's a single family home where, you invest 10,000, maybe the home's only worth 50,000 or the purchase price is only 50,000, but the sponsor will get a property manager to manage the home. They'll find the tenant. It'll be income producing. And so you invest 10 out of the 50 and you have, 1/5 of the income from that property. And of course, if the property's not making money, you're not going to get that income, but it's a real estate investment that you can make with lower funds, a lower amount of money than you otherwise would have to invest.
Great. And Kendall, you had mentioned something about social causes earlier, and I know it's something that your firm has gotten pretty deeply involved with. Is there another example you'd like to share?
Well, I think it's a dangerous world to get into. If you want to piss off 1/2 of the United States, pick a side and start promoting and offering to it. On the other hand, there's plenty of people on both sides of the aisle that will invest in various social causes. So, I mean, I've seen the gamut of this, but one of the things as lawyers we have to do is to advise people that, and Andrew, you know this as well as anyone, what you're basically doing in a Regulation A offering is you're marketing your company. You're not just marketing selling stock, you're marketing your company. You're spending the money to get more awareness of your company. So if your company is on one side or the other, you're going to be very openly pronouncing that to the world through digital ads, through interviews, through social media posts. And if you, as I look behind me, I see Joe Biden up there. If I were doing something on the right now, you would certainly not want to see Joe Biden behind me. Flip side is the same. If your cause is something on the other side, you don't want to see the other party, but you run into these situations all the time because when you're marketing to raise capital, you're also marketing your company at the same time. And all of Regulation A, I mean, I love to say this as a lawyer. I'm a lawyer to get you to the point where you market, and then I take off my lawyer hat and I become your marketing partner and help run your offering and make sure that the marketing is being done correctly. But the first thing you have to tell people is you're going to be marketing your company. You're going to be going out and talking about it, and that's going to have consequences to your company, not just raising capital, but the company in general. So it's a very, very touchy fine line, and I've managed to walk it very carefully with companies on both sides of the aisle, and will continue to do that. But it's something, Andrew, you're very well aware of, and everyone is that does this. You just have to, in today's world, be very careful.
And I will state for the record, we're involved in political marketing as well. But besides the social stuff, we've talked about real estate. Andrew, do you want to talk about innovation? Because that's another big area. And real estate, I look at yield, social, innovation. Those are some of the three hottest areas in Reg A.
Yeah. So I think absolutely. And I think in a lot of times, in a way you can kind of boil down different types of Reg A or crowdfunding offerings. It's sort of friends, family, and fans, which is sort of your affinity groups and fans investing. Sort of alternative asset classes, which is sort of the fractionalizing what you can deliver through that, and then also public venture rounds, which to describe the types of sort of innovative startup companies that are utilizing Regulation A. In there, it's and we've seen worked with a number of companies that have done this, and it's sort of following. It will typically be they have some cash in the bank. It's following on from a seed round. Or a previous A round, and then it's providing terms that do account for the risk for that early stage investment, but maybe they're just a little bit different, so not quite as favorable as what would be given to sort of venture capital firm or some type of institutional investor. And but companies are able to do very well with that, raising $5–10 million. As a kind of a bridge to the next thing, becoming a sort of the semi-public reporting company under the Reg A regime. But a lot of it goes to what Kendall was talking about. It's a good strategy for companies that believe that they will have some sort of kind of consumer face of their operations in order to be, to be that marketing, have that marketing aspect to it as well. There's some risk to it because you're going out publicly to investors. It's not before the company is fully matured. Many of these companies they're clearly not ready yet for an IPO, but maybe they are. But they are ready to raise a few $1 million from the public through an offering under Regulation A. And so there's some risk to that because you do need to start putting together audited financial statements. You need to make sure that that you fully understand what the risks are to the company. So what is and willing to put down on paper, what is it that keeps you up at night? And that's can be a challenge for a lot of early stage companies of they just don't really want to fully admit what could potentially hold them back from being successful. But that's a very important thing to do in a public securities offering because actually it's there to protect the company from liability to investors.
Agreed. And not only does the company need to state that to their attorneys, they also need to tell that to their investor acquisition or their marketing firm as well.
Mm-hmm.
And far be it from me to end late. We only have one more minute. Oscar, were there any questions that you want to pose from the queue?
No, I think you guys covered most of the questions. Most of you were participating with some of the
So just one other thing is that we do have a panel of companies who are in the process of doing Reg A. And I think a bunch of them actually cover some of what we talked about in this panel. And that's at 1 o'clock. So 1 o'clock Eastern. So that'll be really interesting.
Yeah, I think Lou wanted to get one thing in on the last topic.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it. I was just going to add, Andrew mentioned yield deals, and I neglected to mention it before. there are a lot of really interesting yield deals in Reg A. You know, if you look at the myipo.com platform, which is run by Cambria Capital and Digital Offering, we have a couple of our clients on there. One is in the funeral industry, and they're selling preferred units or preferred shares that have, I think it's a 5 or 6% annual dividend, but after a number of years, you get 150% of your money back. So over the time, it's like a 16 or 17% return. They're a Remembrance Group, and we have another client that's in the mobile home development. They run and operate mobile homes or manufactured housing. They're called manufactured housing properties, and same kind of deal. So there are a lot of these really good yield deals out there that you can take a look at, and they could be great investment opportunities for those looking for yield.
Yeah, and there's tons within hard asset and within soft assets doing that. And a bunch that we've worked on, a bunch that are coming to market soon. So thank you very much, Kendall, Andrew, Lou, and Oscar. I guess it's time for our next panel.